Good evening, folks, and welcome back to tonight's broadcast of the vice presidential debate featuring J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. Not sure if that's tinny or not. A little awkward there. Is that better? A little awkward there. So that's much better. All right, hello, folks. Welcome back to the program. Tonight's broadcast for the vice presidential debate featuring Tim Walz and J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, versus the governor from Minnesota. Let's just get started with a few topics right out of the gate here. This is a debate that normally wouldn't mean a whole lot in a race. However, events in the past 24 hours have struck a nail in the coffin of the Harris campaign. This debate has proven to be more important than anyone expected it to be. Excuse me. Let's run through the list of events just occurring in the last 24 hours. 45,000 longshoremen have gone on strike in the United States. Greedy bastards seeking a 77% pay raise. They've been offered a 50% pay raise. 50%. 5-0, ladies and gentlemen. Would you take a 50% pay rise? I know I would take a 50% pay rise in a heartbeat. But these greedy bastards who are, and I don't mean to insult longshoremen, that's not meant by this, but let's be honest, they're not people coding, they're not people developing cancer cures, they're not people putting their life on the line getting shot at in combat or going to space. These are people who operate forklifts by and large. Now, I don't mean to diminish the task, but you want a 77% pay rise, saying you've been ignored for 132 years, you're just gangsters. You're racketeers trying to shake down America. This will cost the country $5 billion in GDP per day. $5 billion in GDP per day, upwards of that amount. It will devastate our economy, and it comes just in time to screw up Kamala Harris's election campaign. Walz, I wonder if he'll be forced to address that. The hostile crew from CBS this evening, Nora O'Donnell and the other moderator, will obviously not press Timmy Vance for these issues. If they do, they'll be kicked out of the leftist fellow traveler club, and they don't want to do that. That would put their jobs on leftist media at risk, and they're cowards. They won't do that. So they won't do their job. They'll attack J.D. Vance, which is the job of these frauds. But 45,000 longshoremen have gone on strike, crippling the east coast of the United States. Also today, Iran fired, first we heard reports of different ones, but at least 180 ballistic missiles at civilians in Israel. Not a single analyst on the planet, not a single commentator. I've been listening when I've not been online today to Fox News, to MSNBC, to all the other CNN. Not a single person on the planet has stated what today's action was, what I have said. There are three things that come out of today's actions, and the Harris campaign must answer for them, and by extension, little Timmy Stolen Valor Walz. Number one, Iran has committed an act of war. This is a declaration of war. It's not, a mistake. It wasn't, running into an aircraft or bumping a ship at sea. This is an act of war. It's a declaration of war. No one else is saying that. I've said it. Number two, these are crimes against humanity. Iran has fired these ballistic missiles at civilian targets in cities with the intent to terrorize and kill people. Now, admittedly, in the Second World War, the Germans did this, the Brits did this, the Americans did this. They bombed the UK, then we bombed Germany, and the same thing happened. And the intent was to put fear in the hearts of people and destroy infrastructure. Well, that's what they're doing now. That wasn't considered a crime against humanity at the time, but since the Second World War, this sort of action has been declared a crime against humanity. Therefore, I declare that the South African ruling party, the African National Congress, must forthwith, before close of business on Wednesday, the 2nd of October, 2024, they must approach the International Court of Justice with an urgent case to condemn Iran for its crimes against humanity and its war crimes. I'm the only analyst that's calling it that, and that's what it is. And finally, the third point about today's actions of Iran attacking Israel is that the United States is now at war. Now, Joe Biden can pretend we're not at war, and Timmy Harris can lie about it tonight, but we heard from Major General Ryder in the press briefing at the Pentagon today that the United States participated in the defense of Israel. We made ourselves a belligerent in this conflict. We are now a co-belligerent in Iran's war on Israel, and by extension, Hezbollah's war on Israel, and by extension, Hamas's war on Israel. We are now deeply embroiled in this situation. 1/3 of the U.S. Navy is currently sitting in the Eastern Mediterranean, and we are helpless to stop this conflict from raging. Why? Because Donald Trump is not in office, because these lunatic fellow travelers have destroyed world peace, and they then tried to claim that they walked into office with world peace gone. Utter nonsense, complete fantasy, fairy tales. What else has happened? Well, Hurricane Helene. When George Walker Bush was president, he was accused of being insensitive and called a racist because he didn't care about black people, because the government did nothing about Hurricane Katrina, except that is a total lie. I've said this over and over again. I said it at the time. It's unbelievable. I worked in the Pentagon as a major at the time that event occurred. The Department of Defense, for 5 days prior to the storm, moved resources into the Gulf Coast, into the region, pre-positioning helicopters, troops, supplies, water, desalination equipment, water sanitation equipment, troops in place, helicopters, trucks, throughout the Gulf region, in Texas, in Louisiana, in Alabama, in Mississippi. Haley Barbour was the governor of Mississippi, and they had horrific floods from that Hurricane Katrina, yet we didn't hear the total devastation that took place because people adhered to the warnings that the government gave them. The governor was clear to the population, evacuate the areas, and they kept law enforcement patrolling those areas so people's homes weren't burglarized. Meanwhile, people know that in Louisiana, if you leave your home, you're going to be robbed. They're going to clean you out. So people refused to leave, and a lot of people died as a consequence. But the media lied about it and said George Bush was a racist. He did nothing about it. And they said this every day. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm getting unclassified briefings right here with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I'm watching the number of troops in the days before the events happened. We had over 10,000 or almost 10,000 troops in place 4 or 5 days before the event. And that number ramped up to 32,000 before the storm ever hit. And by the time the storm had gone, 3 days after the storm had left the area, the number of Department of Defense military personnel working in the Gulf Coast in relief of Hurricane Katrina was in excess of 128,000 troops. But you would never know that. That's not a state secret. All the cowards in the military who were generals and admirals who've since retired fail to tell you the truth. I will tell you the truth. I was there. I heard it. I saw it. I watched it every day. We rescued 18,900 people after Hurricane Katrina was through there. It is now nearly 5 days since this storm hit the East Coast of the United States, and there are no FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, personnel on the ground anywhere, according to multiple reports throughout the region. There's no one on the ground. Today we heard the lies from Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House press briefing, claiming that, there's 4,600 government employees, and Mayorkas said the same thing. Where? Working from Washington? Sitting on their duffs? They're not delivering water. They're not bringing sanitation equipment. They're not bringing communications equipment. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is not even in office. He's coordinated with Elon Musk to get Starlink deployed into the region to get people communications. He's communicated with resources to get water and food into people. Donald Trump is active and involved, and he's not even in the government. The man is 78 years old. And you can say, well, it's a cynical ploy to get votes. Well, it wasn't a cynical ploy when it was unpopular and Donald Trump built low-income housing in New York City for minority populations. That was not a cynical political ploy, but he did it because he did the right thing all the time. Anyway, this is just crazy stuff. So this coverage of Hurricane Helene and those suffering. Also, let's go back to that storm that hit the East Coast in New Jersey and New York a few years back when Obama was president. Remember that? The fawning attention for Obama. Just around the time that election took place, the midterm election. Ooh, look at this. And then, Chris Christie, Krispy Kreme Christie, the Pillsbury Doughboy, the Michelin man, gets up and says, oh, look at the president doing a great job. He did do a great job. Showed up for a photo op while homes were destroyed and no money came from the federal government for relief, no emergency loans or anything. That took days for that to happen. And he got a nice little photo op and he left. Just reminds me of what happened in Germany, which Schröder, his government survived because Gerhard Schröder, the man who sold German citizenship to the highest bidder and betrayed Germany and Germans, Gerhard Schröder, who showed up when massive floods happened in the eastern part of Germany. And he's like, oh, look I'm the conquering hero. And fools were dumb enough to elect him because of that after what an abysmal period as chancellor. Let's talk about Timmy Walz, stolen valor Timmy Walz, a man who's lied endlessly about his military record, claiming he's a combat veteran when he's not, letting people believe that he served in combat, misleading people with false statements and misleading narratives about his deployment, trying to tie it to Afghanistan and Iraq when it had nothing to do with that. It was simply pulling guard duty in Europe. He went to Italy. I was stationed in Italy. We had terrorists going around Italy, and it was more of a threat than when Timmy Walz was there. And what about Timmy Walz's DUI in Nebraska, pulled over by a state trooper going 95 in a 55 zone or 97 in a 55 zone. The man was out of control, pulled over and arrested for being drunk and processed. And then he went to court and lied. He said he's deaf. He couldn't understand the instructions of the police officer. That's why he failed the sobriety test. No. You failed a sobriety test because you're a drunk. That's why. And you drove 97 miles an hour, endangering public safety. Someone who has such poor judgment. And he wasn't young. He wasn't 18 or 16 or 19. That we might be able to excuse. This was an adult, already an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, mid-ranks non-commissioned officer, senior NCO, and this is his judgment. Driving drunk in his 30s. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Not going to buy that story. Not going to buy that story. This is an unreliable, dangerous, out-of-control lunatic. Stolen valor. He also lied to the judge. There, as I said it. And ironically, the media love this. I don't know who told him to say this, but he said, Trump and Vance are just weird, aren't they? Actually, the guy that's weird, actually, should I say is creepy, is none other than little Timmy Stolen Valor Walz. This guy is the definition of creepy. He is something else. Well, for those of you going to stick with me here, obviously YouTube is censoring this. I mean, if this was fair and they were promoting people covering this, like Officer Tate, and I have hundreds of viewers right now, all I have are 13 South Africans and 3 Americans watching my program now. That's it. This is the impact, the power of shadow banning, the crushing of a channel by the evil clowns at YouTube. But you know what? I put it on this channel because I cover American politics on this channel. Also, I don't want to risk losing my other channel. So there are also questions about Timmy Walz and his love affair with China. Absolutely. There are also questions about his affinity for hanging out with little kids. That's another story. He always looks like he's intoxicated. I agree 100%. Gus is here. Welcome to you. Chris Marie, Ants, Janet Lydian from South Carolina. Janet, are you still in Florida or have you made it back up to South Carolina? It's very tough, as I understand. John Huchin in from Arizona. And Keith Alderson is in from the UK. Well, okay, we got an audience from around the planet. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, anyway, so here's the really bad news for the Harris campaign. Israel is attacked by Iran. And why is that possible? Well, that's possible because Barry Obama and Joe Biden gave Iran hundreds of billions of dollars illicitly, immorally, and illegally, handing over resources that were frozen because of sanctions against them. They are immoral, violent, evil, socialist turds who've endangered global safety and gotten thousands of residents of Israel murdered by T groups as a consequence of Barry Obama. And not to mention the hundreds of thousands that are dead in the Middle East because of his feckless, naive foreign policy, Barry Obama. These are some of the dumbest people ever to grace the stage or the podium of the presidency. Unbelievable how stupid they are. We have not had a Democrat that has known their butt from a hole in the ground since Jack Kennedy. He's the last one. If you look at Jack Kennedy's policies, he's actually conservative. The man reduced taxes. The man was for strong defense. The man was a patriot. Yeah, he just liked to bone everything that moved. But hey, you know, we're not all perfect. Still in Florida, heading home Thursday. I hope no power. Oh, that's a shame. Well, I hope there wasn't anything in the fridge, Janet. That's going to be a miserable sitting to open up your fridge. Whew, boy, man. All right, so that's just kind of the rundown here very quickly about what to expect for tonight. We can expect Norah O'Donnell and the other fraudulent moderator to be most likely hostile towards J.D. Vance. They're also going to probably fact check. They claim they're not going to, but with their opinions and their snide remarks and their facial expressions are probably going to throw shade on Vance. They will try to prop up Timmy Walz and pretend that he's actually a legitimate candidate. This is a man whose record must be tied to him. You can tie Harris and the Biden disaster together. I've just mentioned some of the problems here, but let's talk about Timmy Walz. This guy was the governor of Minnesota when the city went up in flames. The entire country was put through an ordeal that cost us over $3.5 billion in destruction and killed over 150 people around the country and caused social and racial chaos, all because of Timmy Walz's failure to do his job in Minnesota. When the city of Minneapolis was on fire, the governor of Minnesota should have declared a state of emergency, called out the Minnesota National Guard, and put down the lawlessness that was going on. But nope, he sat back and watched it happen. And we've heard his ridiculous, bizarre, mentally deranged wife talk about, yes, I had to open the windows up to smell the flames of revolution and breathe it in. Are you a frickin' lunatic? She is, apparently. And they're a good match together because both of them are bat crap crazy wackadoodles. John wasn't going to watch the debate, but you were with me. Well, I didn't want to watch it, but some people in my audience asked for it, and they showed up. But beyond that, I actually need to watch it for tomorrow because I'll be on the radio doing the Common Sense Conservatives, and I need to be on there. I need to talk about this. So anyway, yeah. By the way, it's no surprise that every single episode of the Common Sense Conservatives now airing on this channel has had limited advertising revenue. One reason why I opened up the memberships again, because I can't make money off of that. We're not even having big audiences and they limit me. So let's take a look. I want to see if anybody signed up for memberships yet. Let me see. I don't think I have any members yet. Oh, one person is signed up. And I'm supposed to get $3 and 99 cents for that membership. And guess what? YouTube took $1.20 of that. That's 1/3. $1.20 is not, or it's almost 1/4. Yeah. Anyway, so I've got one member, whoever that was. Thank you for that. It's a silver supporter. Thank you. Oh, wow. That's even, yeah. Okay. Who is the member? It doesn't tell me who the member is. Where's the members? It usually shows you the members, but I got one member, one person signed up. Thank you for whoever that is. I can't see who that is. That's weird. That is strange. But anyway, usually we can see that. So let me go back to that tab and see if maybe, oh, here we go. Now I can see it. So memberships, that member is, oh, I got 3 members, and all of that, 3 members at $3. Look at this. It says I have 1 member. And actually, all of them are people who've rejoined from previously being here. The restored Erica Holtzkamp, Erica, and Jessica Pucki all have joined here. So all 3 have joined, but only one is showing up on the board. And she joined at the $3.99 level, and I get $2.79. And that's US. So thank you, the 3 of them. Appreciate it. 3 members have shown up here again. So that's awesome. Pretty cool. Do appreciate the support. So, yeah, anyway, so you guys feel free to chat all you want, ask questions, make comments during the debate if you want to keep that helps the chat rate, which is currently at 0 because nobody's chatting. That does draw people in. That really happens a lot with my rugby. So I'm waiting for this thing to go live. We're about 11 minutes away from the debate. Oh my gosh, what a horrific looking lady on PBS. Was she hired for unattractiveness? She has lovely hair. But man, I think somebody beat her with a fork. And her co-host is not very attractive either. Well, here's another unattractive. Is that the key designator to be a host on the PBS NewsHour? Is your unattractiveness? Wow. Let me listen into this lady real quick.
$1 million a year or more, the tax rate on your long-term capital gains will be 28% under my plan because
28% capital gains, plus they want to put in, they want a 48 or a 20% unrealized capital gains. These people are evil, absolutely bat crap crazy evil. Wow, this is something else. So Vance, this debate is taking place in New York, and Vice Presidential candidates GOP Senator J.D. Vance and Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz preparing to face off for their first and only debate tonight. Stakes are high as Republican Democratic campaigns race to make their pitch in the final days because there'll be no more presidential debates after Trump was subjected to the partisan garbage that took place last time. He said, no point in this. 90 minutes debate time. The candidates was asked a question. We'll have 2 minutes to answer. The other candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Network says it reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones. Okay, so let me take a look at all the debate rules and see if there's anything else that's odd here. All right, so why doesn't it just take me there? That's weird. Didn't do that. So if I click on it, it takes me right to the same place. And there's no rules here. Oh, what a broken system. These guys are idiots. So the rules are not listed here. Thank you so much for that. Well, they talk about the polls, and in the polls, AP says that Vance is less well-liked than Walz. Well, that's because of the free media blitz and the lies about creepy Tim Walz, little tampon Timmy there. That's the first time I've called him that, but he deserves it. The poll shows, by the way, that's another thing. This guy is allowed for, boys to take a dump and go to the bathroom in girls' bathrooms, and insisted that we install tampons into boys' bathrooms in schools. What the hell's wrong with him? Additionally, he's also done some transgender things. He has granted driver's license to criminal alien invaders who are illegally in our country, turning Minnesota into a sanctuary state in violation of the Constitution. There was a shooting, Richard Kuhn, earlier today before the bombings took place, in which 6 people passed away. They at a Tel Aviv light rail, they murdered people with automatic weapon and a knife, stabbing people and shooting them on the platform, and people tried to shelter in the train car. 6 people dead, killed by terrorists. And the security forces killed both of the terrorists. Yeah, CNN had the rules on earlier. Well, this is where I'm at, CNN, and it doesn't show me the rules. It just takes me all over the place. So, fact check. Walz's false claims about Vance, Trump, and Project 25. Wow, they're actually doing that. Wow, Walz claimed in a speech that North Carolina. Ooh, Rolf Corver, super chat. Thank you, brother. Wow, that's awesome. That's probably more money than I made on this channel in the last month or 2 months. 350 rand. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks, Rolf. I hope you're not leaving, but thank you for being here. Ahead of tonight's vice presidential debate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz made at least 3 false claims over the past couple of weeks about Republican vice presidential candidate and presidential candidate Donald Trump. 2 of the false claims were about Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation think tank's detailed right-wing blueprint for the next Republican administration. Project 25 has been the subject of multiple false or misleading claims from Vice President Harris this summer. The campaign declined to comment. Walz claimed in a speech in North Carolina last Tuesday, and now Trump is trying to create this new government entity that will monitor all pregnancies and enforce their abortion bans. Where did they get this nonsense from? He even made a more dramatic claim in a speech in Wisconsin on September 14th. Think about it when they're saying in Project 25, you're going to have to register with the new federal agency when you get pregnant. Both of these, of course, are false, and CNN admits that. Project 2025 does not propose to make people register with any federal agency when they get pregnant, and there's no indication that Trump is trying to create a new government entity. Well, also beyond that, Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025, so all three claims are lies. All Pinocchios. You're welcome, Richard. All Pinocchio claims by the frauds. See, look, they're going to try to make this about abortion. It has nothing to do with abortion. Abortion is decided. The Dobbs decision ended that debate. It's over. Roe versus Wade, which was illegal, unconstitutional, is gone now. The Dobbs decision restored the question of that to the states as the Constitution directs. The 10th Amendment says those laws not specifically granted in the Constitution to the federal government or expressly prohibited to the states, like national defense, which falls to the federal government, revert to the states and or the people respectively. That's what the 10th Amendment says. That's almost a verbatim statement from the 10th Amendment. The decision in the Roe versus Wade was legislating from the bench. It was illegal. It was unconstitutional. Yet it stood for over half a century, and over 55 million Americans were murdered in the womb as a consequence of it. Many of them unnecessarily. Many of these pregnancies never would have taken place if people had been forced to be responsible for their own sexual reproduction, to be responsible for their own actions. No, instead, we just sling it here, open and spread there, dip it in, dip your wick in, and, consequences. Simple. No mess, no fuss. We just go and get it terminated. Well, it's a human life you're terminating. And that is not something the federal government had the authority to do. Their job is to protect life. Instead, they terminated lives. And these are lies by the Democrats. That decision is done. The states decide. Not a single state in the union has banned abortion. Not a single state in the union has banned abortion. Not a single state in the union has banned abortion 2.5 years after the Dobbs decision. These people are liars, pathological liars, the states. Now, some states have sought to restrict when you can have an abortion, how you can have an abortion, who can have an abortion. Absolutely. And they have also tried to protect parental rights so that you're knowing if your 13-year-old child is pregnant. Now, why would you want to know about your 13-year-old child's pregnancy? Because you're responsible for their health and their safety and welfare. But they want to hide that. So what if someone's diddling your 13-year-old daughter? Yep, the neighbor's diddling your daughter. She gets pregnant. And the school helps her go get an abortion. These aren't fairy tales. These are true stories. And hides it from you. And then your daughter gets diddled again by the perv neighbor. And you don't know about it. Wow. Unbelievable. But that's the world we live in. That's what's happening, folks. All right, so we're waiting for this thing to come up. Let me see if I can't find another option here because this one is not looking too good at the moment. They're all getting ready. They're going to go over right before the top of the hour. NBC News. I don't want NBC News. CNBC. I don't want that. Fox. I'll get one of these. I was hoping for PBS, but I don't see PBS. There's C-SPAN. Oh, there we go. C-SPAN is, let me see which one's looking good there. C-SPAN. All right, I might get a little slowdown in the connection here now because I opened up a bunch of windows live streaming simultaneously. All right, let's see. So PBS. This chick has got a wart on her nose. That's kind of distracting. They want me to donate to Harris. They want me to buy a hoodie. No, thank you. So that's PBS. That's the same thing I have on the other one. Are they all feeding me the same thing? No. Okay, skip this one here. Okay, all right, that's a Fox News. Okay, so we'll see. We might go with the Fox News one. All right, waiting for this thing to come up live. They're eating cats. That's funny. All right, cool. Thank you for the super chat. That is awesome to get us started here tonight. That's pretty incredible. That's more money I made in a few months on this channel. All right, so we're down to 10 viewers right now. Wow, people leaving. So, yep. But thanks for the coming and popping in here. It's 79 people currently have tuned in so far. All right. By the way, the video I did earlier, the live stream with the press conferences on my regular channel at Colonel Chris Wyatt had over 1,800 views, 1,900 views. I was really shocked by that. Didn't expect to see that. So, what is this? Now, what are they doing? They're moaning about J.D. Vance's age. All right, here's C-SPAN. It looks like the only one that's actually in the studio. So I have to make sure that I don't get comments from other clowns. Okay, this PBS, and that's PBS again. I got it twice. I don't need that twice. Okay. So this creepy woman is still talking about Vance. Okay, we'll see what happens here. The bar is very low for Walz. All he has to do is not explode, not have his thin skin be revealed to show what a little wuss that he is. and he'll skate through this debate. They're going to come after J.D. Vance because they're not objective. We'll see how Vance does. They're trying to play it up like Vance is polished. He's tested on the campaign trail. But Timmy Walz has been a member of Congress for years, doing nothing, and now a governor of Minnesota for years, doing nothing, and a vice presidential candidate now for over a month, doing nothing. He should be able to perform in the debate. So let's see how he does. If Walz performs well, it won't be a shocker. He should perform well. They're trying to lower the expectations because they are frauds, and that's what's going on here. So wait to see what happens here as we come up, but we're just about 2 minutes away. Let's see when they go live. No, I don't donate to Harris. I'm not donating to Trump. The guy's a billionaire. He doesn't need my money to run for office. He spent $160 million of his money last time. Let him spend his own money. I've donated one time, and that was to Newt Gingrich, just because I didn't like Romney. So I donated to Gingrich, and he lost. Yep, that's it. I guess technically I had a donation to the Trump campaign because I bought something from one of the shops, and they claimed that it was a donation. I didn't buy it from Trump, but anyway. But it wasn't directly donated to him. So, all right, C-SPAN. We got 2 minutes to go. It's 5:58 on the west coast of the United States. Here on the east coast, it is 8:59 now. 8:59. Excuse me, Eastern time. Yeah, 5:59 in California on the left coast. We are just about ready to get going here. Get ready for an interesting debate, hopefully, and we'll see what happens with little Timmy Walz and his stolen valor, and J.D. Vance, a senator from Ohio. So, all right. Did they just get frozen? No. This is the chica with the wart on her nose. It's just PBS. Again, they must pick the most unattractive people. I guess they can't get jobs on the networks because they're not attractive. This lady looks to be frozen. Oh, she's just not moving on C-SPAN. She's frozen. Well, it's supposed to be on 9 o'clock. It's now 9 o'clock, and nobody's gone there. So what's the deal here? Could we get to it? Oh, gee, the Kiffness did another cat video. Got 10 million views. Oh, God. Oh, 10 million views. So, oh, boy. Tim Walz has his own page, and he's got 3,800 people watching it. Wow. All right. Are we going live now? Come on. Somebody, let's go. None of them are getting ready. They're all doing their banners. It's 9 p.m., folks. I'm not ahead of the clock here. I'm on atomic time. Okay, vice presidential debate. Simulcast. PBS and CBS. All right, are we there? All right, they're going to it. Oh, who are these? Oh, ghouls. Fox is still not there. Wow, this is frustrating for those of us trying to bring you content. They are not ready. CNN has started. How can CNN start? They're not even broadcasting it, at least not on YouTube. CNN. Let's see if I can find CNN. Okay. Okay. It's not here. This doesn't show up anywhere. And all I'm getting is adverts. Okay, here we go. Okay, I got it. There we go. All right. I haven't started yet, but I've got it. Okay. Just a second. There we go. All right, folks. It's time to get this party started.
CBS News headquarters in New York. America decides. The vice presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met.
John Kelly's a traitor.
And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Well done.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches.
Now, Donald
Look,
Trump
our
took out
allies
Suleiman,
understand
the person responsible
that
for the
Donald
attack.
Trump
These guys
is
just
fickle.
lie.
He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal.
They didn't pause the deal.
He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible. And then, of course, afterwards, afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output.
China.
So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Yeah, 100%.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in
Debt spending.
Global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer.
To China and India for their
thinking
emissions,
about
not
how
us.
do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the
J.D.
oil
Vance
company
didn't call it a
executives
hoax.
to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up.
Yeah,
the
that wasn't
overwhelming
a good
consensus
response.
among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora.
Excuse me.
We're going to turn
What the
now
hell is that
to
bullshit?
immigration.
That's
the
not a
crisis
question.
at the U.S.-Mexico
Nora O'Donnell,
border
you scumbag.
consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how
Fair
this
question.
will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? Yep. So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. Yep. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. Yep. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Yep. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor,
let's see how he does.
Do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this. And that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen.
No.
It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation.
Garbage.
The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents. Detection for
We don't
drugs.
need new border agents. We need
DOJ
the
money
law
to
be
speed
enforced,
up
Timmy.
these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no.
Donald Trump isn't in government.
Because it gives him a campaign issue.
He's not in government.
What would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it.
Congress stopped it.
Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
The bill is unnecessary.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S.
Doesn't
citizens?
he get a chance to respond to what
Margaret, my
Vance
point is that we already
Walz
have
said?
massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country.
Correct.
And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this, and Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally.
No, they're not here legally. That's a lie.
The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it.
Because he lied.
There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Lankford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school.
That's a lie.
I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our border czar, Kamala Harris, has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You've got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days.
Well,
then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status.
They do not.
Temporary protected status.
Margaret, but
thank you. Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret, the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check. And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something
cut his microphone off.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand.
No,
so those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago. He said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class.
That's a lie.
What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing
because of
a
COVID.
20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it. It would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is
We're in
simple
a
for you.
recession.
Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
People aren't participating.
Senator, I
That's
want
the
to give you a
problem.
moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion.
That's why
My
they
question
keep
is
that.
the same for you.
lie.
How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us.
China.
This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had
you were in power. You didn't do anything
people
about it.
undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions.
Not really. Only in recent
We want to
history.
ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years.
What? You lied.
And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people working on things.
He's not answering the question. She said you lied about going to being in Beijing for Tiananmen Square. He's telling us about what a great, wonderful guy he is and how people voted for him because they're confident in him. It has nothing to do with the lie. He's bold-faced lying.
To make sure that I get this right, I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier, or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Wow.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said.
Okay. But you never said that.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Wasn't there during the democracy protest.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've said, you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear?
Fair question.
And not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Why do they always say that after he finishes?
Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind.
No, it's not.
Donald Trump put this all into motion.
No,
he
didn't.
brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade. 52 years of personal autonomy.
Yeah,
and then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said,
allowed.
2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works.
Yes,
this is basic human right. We have seen
right to murder someone else.
Maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restricted state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making child care more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that, too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. Yep. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things work best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care.
So I pay for their kids.
Hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Folks, that is exactly what the law says in Minnesota. He's lying. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you tuning in. We're at a break, a pause in this effort right now with the vice presidential debate. Let me just grade things so far. I'd say that J.D. Vance is knocking it out of the park. Only once have I seen him struggle. He's doing a great job. Tim Walz is doing okay. He's doing well on some points, but he is telling one lie after another. He told this whopper, which even CNN has fact-checked and said was nothing but a bold-faced lie about having an agency to register pregnancies. This is utter nonsense. I don't understand why Republicans are just so dim-witted, including J.D. Vance. All you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is read the Constitution. The Constitution specifically prohibits the federal government from regulating abortion. They have no authority to regulate it, except for federal agencies, the Department of Defense and VA hospitals and things like that. But the 10th Amendment specifically lays this out, ladies and gentlemen. The 10th Amendment, the power is not delegated to the United States, that's the federal government, by the Constitution. In other words, the Constitution doesn't say you're responsible for it, nor prohibited to it by the states. In other words, national defense is prohibited to the states. It's reserved to the federal government. These powers are reserved to the states respectively or to the people through a referendum. That is the truth. Why can't Republicans simply state that? It's a violation of the Constitution. It was a 50-year violation of the Constitution. It was an embarrassment to the nation, to the republic, to all that we stand for. If they want to allow abortion at the federal level, then let them propose a constitutional amendment to change the Constitution, to alter the 10th Amendment, or to simply, that's dangerous, to simply bring another amendment that would allow the federal government to regulate abortion. And then let all 75% of the states ratify it within a 10-year period, which is the normal process. If 75% of the states do not ratify it through their state legislatures, then it will not become the law. And that's what they're afraid of, because they know that Americans won't go for murdering babies. Yep. And this lie about 12-year-old girl, that's nonsense. Rape and incest, every state has exceptions for rape and incest. Stop lying, Timmy Walz. Stop lying, Democrats. And Republicans, get your head out of your fourth point of contact and start telling people the facts. You know, eventually they're going to catch on, because I know they listen to my content and then don't bother to put me on the news programs. Eventually they'll catch on. These dim-witted Republicans will start telling the truth. Why did none of them know what the Constitution says? It's pretty simple. For 50 years, we had an illegal abuse of the Constitution by an extrajudicial, illegal, out-of-control Burger Court. Warren Burger's Supreme Court violated the Constitution and got away with it. Look, we had the same thing happen with Plessy versus Ferguson, in which an out-of-control federal Supreme Court declared that separate but equal was legal under the Constitution, even though it violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. And that lasted until 1954, 56 years, when Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, in the court, a conservative court under a Republican administration, struck down that racist decision from 1896 in Plessy versus Ferguson. That, 58 years, not 56 years. That is the facts. And you don't like the facts, Jack? That's too bad. But the reality here is that the Republicans are feckless. And look, I've been very complimentary of Vance so far, but he's feckless if he doesn't have the nads to stand up and tell the truth. Does he not know that the Constitution expressly prohibits the states from doing this, or the federal government from doing this? It's utter nonsense. Vance is coming across as honest, owning up to what he has said previously and been hoodwinked by MSNBC. Yep. I'd be watching any other feed for this debate, but I chose to watch the Colonels. Thank you very much, Courtney. I appreciate being here. The handful of people here. Thanks to Janet and Nick for becoming members, to Erica and to Erica Holtzkamp and to Picky earlier. Thank you, Jessica, for becoming a member. So we're already off. Jose Lucio, excelente presidente Trump of President America. Oh, that's excellent. Thank you for being. I think Waltz watched Tiananmen from Chinatown. He lied about that. He lied about being in Tiananmen Square, and then he doubled down the lie instead of telling the truth. Very disappointing. Okay, I don't want to get a copyright strike for music.
Back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. Correct. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Good answer.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is...
Won't allow research to be done. You have thousands of universities and think tanks around the country that do research. They're not controlling that. They're not making it legal. You want to spend our tax dollars to do research? Do it at the state level there, Timmy.
Far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen. Even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns.
He said it was one.
It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent.
No, energy.
There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing
that's
prices.
because we got 30 million criminal
Governor
aliens.
Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes.
Correct, yeah.
Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this. This issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family.
As a kid.
We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there,
money out of my
one
pocket,
of the,
you thief.
certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment.
You earn that.
Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics.
Correct. She's been there
She is the
3.5 years.
sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Yep.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where? Yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice
Sorry, 88. Sorry, I'm not going to. Hang on, let me see what the question is here.
debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more?
The Great Lakes hold 84% of North America's surface fresh water, and 21% of the entire planet's fresh water.
In healthcare, I believe, members of my
Minnesota.
family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along.
Sure.
And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time
for our kids
with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Lying about pre-existing conditions.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. Exactly. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Right, Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
He did.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is...
So you think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret.
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss.
Margaret, let's talk about families in America.
You got 8 minutes left.
There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
0 days. 0 days.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest.
Where do tax breaks
He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take care of our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Still don't agree with it.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Demand is too high.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows.
Issue.
I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive.
That's the biggest issue.
And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. No, so not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Isn't this comical in a country where they're talking about Americans are not at a replacement level, not having children, this whole discussion about child care?
Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud.
That's not true.
The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. Yep. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state Capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over.
I'm sorry. What about the murder of police officers in Minneapolis by thugs when you were governor?
But the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win.
Well, they did nothing to try to
That's
help
what was
us
at
win.
stake here. Now,
They
the thing I'm
undermined the
most
Trump
concerned about
administration
is
the entire 4 years.
the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people
What do you
not
think they're doing
accepting
to
this.
Trump for 4
And a
years?
president's words matter.
Oh, my
A
God.
president's words matter.
gosh.
People
Set
hear
himself
that.
up.
So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened
But that's what
on
Trump did.
January
He let
6th,
Hillary
the
Clinton off
first
the hook.
time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power.
That's
And
not what
here we
happened.
are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Then quit.
Margaret?
challenging.
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January
Correct.
the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a
5,000.
long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election,
So do
I'm on
Democrats.
board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Yep.
Governor?
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point.
Oh, I
but
know.
the issue
Democrats.
was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do
There's
something.
censorship to stop people from telling the truth, like
Censorship is
me.
book banning.
Look at this,
We've
25
seen that.
people
We've
watching
seen
this
that
fucking
brought up.
broadcast.
I
It
just
should be
think for
25,000 right
everyone
now.
tonight,
I'm the
and
one
I'm
voice of
gonna
reason that knows what the
thank
hell I'm
Senator
talking
Vance.
about.
I
I'm
think
censored.
this is the conversation
Shut the
they
fuck
want
up,
to
Tim
hear.
Walz.
And I
You
think there's a lot of
shitbags.
agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy
It
in a
wasn't
way
a
that we
threat.
had
You're a
not
moron.
seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald
You
Trump's
weren't even
inability to
there,
say.
Walz.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind
There you
in the
go.
wake
Well
of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is
Has she tried to-
that is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further.
Yep.
But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the
threatening or
power
hate
of
speech.
government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another.
Yep.
Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test.
That's
the
not
Supreme
free
Court test.
speech.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator,
wear
the
masks.
governor does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Sorry.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every
That's right.
American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to
Please.
respond to you.
Yeah, well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate
No,
out
but your
there
government
who
colluded to
refused,
silence
and
us
now
on Facebook.
again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about
It's
is
his job to
where
certify
is the
election.
firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? will you keep your oath of office even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Yeah,
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
Yeah, okay. They just their whole goal was to use abortion, which was what, 20 minutes on the abortion, and now to go on about 2020. They're never going to let it go. The real threat to democracy is the Democrats. In 2000, they denied the election results. They filed lawsuit after lawsuit to disenfranchise military personnel on active duty stationed overseas in Florida to steal Florida. That was 2000. In 2004, one Democrat in the House, one Democrat in the Senate denied Ohio's electoral votes, and they froze the process, and they had to debate what happened with Ohio's electoral votes over a bogus lie about election fraud in Ohio. It was 2004. In 2016, when Trump won, Hillary Clinton denied it. She talked about Macedonian server farms and about Russian interference. It was the Russians bought $5,000, not $500,000, J.D. Vance, of Facebook ads. It had nothing to do with the election outcome. They lied because they were shocked. They tried to deny it. Stacey Abrams has denied that she lost, and she's done it for year after year after year. This is the norm for Democrats. They do this over and over and over again. And the one time that Republicans actually challenge and question an election, they turn it into something that it's not. Anyway, it's ridiculous. So far, we'll hear closing remarks. What I will say is that I'm very impressed by J.D. Vance. My view of him has been altered as a consequence of this debate tonight. My view on J.D. Vance has changed. I have a degree of confidence in him that I lacked before tonight. I will say that Tim Walz is the stolen valor, lying New World Order puppet that I expect him to be, but I would say that he did a pretty good job. I would also say that I liked the demeanor between the two candidates. This was a very, very gentlemanly debate. It was an actual debate, not simply anything. What I will say about the media is that both of these clowns were ass wipes. They were not asking questions. They were making statements. Twice now, they came out very clearly to me. They simply made statements. They didn't ask questions. And they made statements to both candidates, but primarily they made statements to J.D. Vance. And then they came back to things that he answered as if he never answered it. They did it once to Walz. Walz completely ignored the question on Tiananmen Square. He lied about it, then claimed it was a misstatement. No, it's stolen valor, just like his military record, just like his lying about being a command sergeant major, just like his lies about being deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq. He didn't state that, but he allowed people to believe it through an act of omission, and that's a lie. So, Walz did what he had to do. J.D. Vance knocked it out of the park most of the debate. I'd say if there's a winner in this, pending the final comments, which will come up in a few minutes, the winner is J.D. Vance by a wide margin. But that said, it doesn't change anything. It won't move the needle. I never expected it to move the needle. I would say that J.D. Vance is based. I didn't like his position, his attacking of Appalachians. I'm an Appalachian. I didn't care for it. His stereotyping of people as being, toothless oaks who live in the hills and sleep with their sisters. That's not what he said in his book, Hillbilly Elegy, but that is what he implied. I didn't like that. But I've seen a different side of J.D. Vance today. I also watched him when he attacked Trump in 2016 and when he was a senator, and I didn't like that either. But I was impressed by J.D. Vance, very impressed. I was actually impressed by, you can go back, Bad Papa Band, and watch it from the beginning. We're not over. We still got closing comments by both candidates. I was also impressed by Tim Walz. He didn't lose his cool. I don't know what they gave him or what they told him to do, how they coached him, but did a pretty good job maintaining his cool. He didn't get frazzled too often, but he did lie endlessly. I mean, he lied and lied and lied and lied. He lied about Project 2025. He mentioned it once. He lied about Trump's position on so many things. He lied about, what Kamala Harris's policies are. But he did it convincingly, and enough sheep out there will believe what he had to say. Again, vice presidential debates don't change anything. It doesn't move the needle one way or the other normally. It has very little impact on the race. If anything, I would say that if anybody benefits, the Republicans will benefit from this. So we come back now for the final comments in this. Both get closing remarks.
Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz,
cool
you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly,
thank you to the American
thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you.
And good night. Well, all right, folks. There you have it. That's the debate. Let me get the camera sorted out here because the way I've got this done is going to take a moment here. So I need to turn that one off. And I need to turn, hang on a second here. I need to turn that off because it's using the camera, and then I can bring it back on here. And there it works. All right, good to go. All right, listen, the politics of joy, I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. Okay, let me do a poll. There's just a handful of people here right now. Let me do a poll and see what y'all got to say here. So, all right, I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask anyway. Who won? Who won? Is Courtney still here? It's not late, Courtney. You can be up this hour. Oh, shoot. Cap, who won? Whoops. All right, here's the poll. Who won the poll? Or who won the debate, not the poll? So who won? Vance, Walz, or was it a draw? All right, here's your chance. Yeah, so we got 24 people currently, or 26. Maybe we can get some folks. Courtney's still here. Courtney, is your chance to vote. Please feel free to vote there. Yeah, so this was much better than the lame presidential debate that we had. That was pathetic. This was actually a debate. It was cordial. It was substantive. The moderators were evil trolls and nasty, slimy leftist. But, you know, it still went pretty well despite that and their clear effort to stack the deck in favor of Tim Walz and against Donald Trump. The entire conversation by Tim Walz was about Donald Trump, the entire conversation. To be fair, the entire conversation by, not entire, but a big portion of the conversation by Vance also centered on Kamala Harris, but he gave substantive answers when he said things about Harris. Let me clarify something very quickly here. So VA loans, Tim Walz, are not something that everybody gets because your service earns you that privilege. That is a privilege that a veteran gets. And the way it works is that as a veteran, you don't have to put down a down payment. Most times when you borrow a loan from a bank, they expect you to put down 20 to 30% collateral. So if you buy a $300,000 house, they expect you to put together $60,000 of equity and put that down to borrow the other $240,000. That's insane. As a veteran, you put down $0. But what they don't tell you is that a veteran, you're paying for that privilege. Yeah, that's right. It's not free. You give the government money. That's right. It's called a funding fee. That's right, folks. You pay a funding fee. And the first time I paid it, it was $2,800 or $3,800. And it goes up every time you buy a home and you use a VA loan. The last loan I got, I paid almost $9,000 in a funding fee. So I had to pay $10,000 to the government so I could get a loan. And I don't get it back. If I have to put money down to borrow money and I'm not a veteran, that's equity. That's money I put in the house. That means that's how much of the house I bought already belongs to me. That $10,000 went to the federal government. I never see it again. It doesn't increase the value of my home. It's a scam. It's a scam that defrauds veterans. The only advantage is you don't have to come up with a buttload of cash early on. And if you're a veteran first-time home buyer, it's very advantageous. But if you bought a second home, which many veterans do as their family grows and expands, then you're screwed. They cheat you. It's all a scam, just like the federal student loan program. Now currently entirely on the backs of U.S. taxpayers because we fund it. It isn't done by private banks anymore. It's done by us. So this is something that is absolutely ridiculous. Vance's closing statement was better than Walz. Yeah, I agree. Bad, Papa Ben. I agree 100%. I think Vance won, but I chose Walz for your poll. I'm a rhino after all. Courtney, shame on you. Shame on you. Anyway, yeah, so there's no such thing as a free lunch. Veterans don't get a free lunch when it comes to a VA-sponsored loan. They don't get one. So that's not talked about. And I'm sorry, Tim, veterans earn that privilege through their sacrifice and their service. Giving it to criminal alien invaders, giving it to first-time home buyers who've done nothing. They have no sweat equity into earning that advantage. And that tax credit that you want to give them comes out of my pocket to give to someone else to finance their home. You're not giving me $25,000 to buy my home. What the hell is that? Why does someone else get that advantage? I had to work and earn my way in life to build up my equity, to build up my resources, to earn my way in life. No, just like student loan forgiveness. This is garbage. Absolute garbage. You know, this is ridiculous. All they ever do want to do is build the debt bigger and bigger and bigger to bankrupt and collapse the system. That's what it's all about. This is all what it's all about. And don't worry, Bill Gates and Larry Ellison and Tim Walz and Kamala Harris and Barack Obama and all these other scumbags have all the money that they need. They will never suffer. Because of their privilege and their connections, they will live the life of wealth. They'll hang out with P. Diddy at his whiteouts, his racist whiteouts. Unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. They want to take more money out of your pocket and mine. Childcare. This is the most important issue. That's not the most important issue. If people think childcare is the most important issue, then they're pretty stupid. It may be the most important issue for young parents who both want to work, who choose to work or have no choice but to work, and then pay exorbitant rates for childcare. But the reason they're paying exorbitant rates for childcare is because there's a lack of resources in the marketplace. There are not enough providers, not enough people watching kids. So how do you fix that? Well, you incentivize people to become child care providers. You make it easier to do it instead of over-regulating it, requiring licenses and this and that and all this other stuff. You make it easier, and that's what you do. I think Vance won if you don't rely on mainstream media, but for those who are stuck, there was probably a draw. I think you're right there. Is that Car Fixer 123? Thanks for being here. Wow, looks like I got some new faces on an old channel that's still being harassed and censored by YouTube. Thanks for being here, guys. I don't recognize your username, so I hope obviously you became a subscriber. Don't leave the channel. I still do U.S. politics on here. On election night, I'm debating about whether I'll do it here or I'll do it on my regular channel, which will have a much bigger audience. But I'll probably do it on my regular channel because a lot of South Africans will tune in. For those who don't know, I'm Colonel Retired Chris Wyatt, United States Army, 36.5-year veteran, combat veteran, multiple combat tours, 23 years spent overseas, 3 tours in Germany, 1 in Italy, stationed in Africa and Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Nigeria, Mauritania, Uganda, and Ethiopia. I ran HIV programs, tuberculosis programs, hunted terrorists, taught at foreign military academies, graduated from the L'École d'État Major, the Staff College in Tunisia. I'm a graduate of the U.S. Army Command General Staff College, the U.S. Army War College, a graduate of Troy University, master's degree in international relations, a master's degree in strategic studies from the Army War College. I've taught undergraduate at Iowa State University, postgraduate at the Army War College. I'm a published author in academic circles with the U.S. Army War College and with Stellenbosch University in South Africa. Popular press, I'm often a source on counterterrorism and national security issues for newspapers like the Washington Examiner, a frequent guest on programs around the country, and a radio broadcaster every Wednesday night on WSMM, the Common Sense Conservatives. And I'm a journalist who travels around the world reporting on news and events and do a daily news program on my regular channel now. This is the original channel that was censored for 2 years by YouTube but brought back last year. But it's being still stamped on by YouTube, so they got their thumb on it so people don't find it. You can find me at Colonel Chris Wyatt, on YouTube from my other channel if you want to subscribe to that. And that's where I do a daily news program, which is unique. No one else in the world does news the way I do it. Every day at 6 p.m. South Africa time. So when daylight savings kicks in, it becomes a 7-hour difference here in the U.S. But right now it's at noon. Soon it'll be 11 a.m. I do a 90-minute news program, and I engage my audience at a level that virtually no other content creator does on YouTube. I do the news, and I report all news across Africa, hotspots around the world, and on the U.S. in the end. And I start with Africa and South Africa, and I wind up with the U.S. at the end, and I engage with my audience. I do prepared videos on all sorts of things. So thanks for being here. Please become a subscriber. If you want to be a financial supporter of the channel, I subsidize all of this on my own. My YouTube earnings only cover a tiny fraction of my costs. Oftentimes, they barely cover my internet costs, let alone what it costs to build a gaming machine and what it costs for travel and transportation and all the other software packages I put together. So, Car Fixer 123 has been sub forever. Just don't talk much. Have you been sub forever on this channel or on my other channel? Because this channel was gone for 2 years and I had no content for 2 years. YouTube censored me over a video that didn't even exist. So, but thank you for that. Hey, Carlos, how's it going? Welcome in from South Africa. So, at least Vance acknowledged mainstream media influence in the past and now as well. Yeah, that's good. That was well. That's something wrong with my chest, man. What's going on here? Am I getting fat or have I got something growing inside me? Anyway, it's painful right here. Anyway, all right. So yeah, I had to resub here against these Gypsy Backpackers. Yeah, they keep taking my subs off. You got to keep an eye on that, folks. So it's very important to do that. Because that's what YouTube works. Well, I just gained a few subscribers during this, even though we had a small audience, 213 people. We picked up about 7 or 8 subscribers. That's pretty good for a live stream, but thank you for that. Had I done this on my South African channel, I would have had a much bigger audience, north of 1,000, maybe 2,000 people. But it's U.S. politics. I want to try to keep it on this channel. So there you go. Yeah, so anyway, that's the situation. If there's a winner tonight, in my book, it's J.D. Vance. 93% of those who listened in. And this isn't like my rugby where I do all the commentary and you don't see the game. Why is this not coming down? There we go. Okay, there we go. I'm going to end the poll. Just 14 votes. So I think only Courtney is the only one who actually voted against it. So everyone thought that Walz won. So end the poll right there. 14 votes. There you go. It's not ending. YouTube. I can't end the poll. Anyway, it wouldn't let me end it, so gotta love it. All right, folks. I'm froze. What's going on here? Am I broadcasting? What the heck is going on here? Am I not broadcasting? What's going on here? Hang on a second. It says I'm live. Maybe it's just that tab that's frozen. Okay, this says end the poll. Okay, there you go. I was live. Sorry, folks. Oh, and there's some gifted membership. Wow, Nick. Wow, are there even 5 people here? So people just got gifted memberships. Thank you for that, Nick. I appreciate that. So for those who don't know, I give a salute every time someone becomes a paying member. Myra, congratulations. It's a sign of respect from a retired colonel to those who support the channel financially. It was frozen for me, Shawnee. It was in my browser, so I wasn't sure. Congratulations on your membership there. And yeah, so we're off to a good start. Thanks to Nick and also to the other 4 people signed up on their own tonight. Do appreciate that. So as these come up, I will recognize them still. Courtney gets a gift of membership. Bad Papa Band, congratulations on yours. Chris couldn't vote, caught the ass end of it. Sorry, Val, you just tuned in late. Go back and watch it from the beginning if you don't mind. You're live, says Nick, okay? So Courtney McBride gets a salute, a Navy enlisted member from a retired Army colonel. Drunken Yoda, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hester. Congratulations. Yeah, so look, I think that, like I said, if there's a winner, it's Vance. Vance was impressed me. It's changed my opinion, J.D. Vance, which wasn't particularly high, to be honest. So I actually got good things to say about his performance tonight. Walz did what he had to do. He didn't self-destruct, and he told lie after lie, but hey, that's how it goes. That's what Democrats do. Republicans do it too, but not true conservatives. J.D. Vance stepped up in my book. Thanks, dude. Bert appreciates it for sure. Okay, cool beans. All right, hell no, I'm going back to bed. Not now, Val. Watch it in the morning. All right, I'm going to knock off. It's been a long day for me. I've had the interview on Megaphone Rugby this morning. Then I had my news program, and that went long because we're waiting for the press conferences related to the Israel attacks from Iran. Then I set up a live stream for that. I did that. Then I had business to do at the Veterans Organization. I went there and signed payroll checks and then signed a bunch of other checks and also conferred with one of the other officers, 2 of the other officers actually. I left there and then I went shopping. I picked up some new books. Actually, let me go back and show you the books real quick, guys. Hang on. Those of you who know me know that I have one true vice, and it's books. I love books. So I picked up this book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's a sequel to his Tipping Point book, Revenge of the Tipping Point. Malcolm Gladwell. This is pretty cool. I'm looking forward to reading this one. That's pretty awesome. Picked that one up. And then this one here, Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard's latest book, Confronting the Presidents, No Spin Assessments from Washington to Biden, in which the co-authors assess the presidencies of every single president in the history of the United States. And then I picked this one up by Dan Jones, the guy who wrote the Da Vinci Code. Isn't he the one who wrote Da Vinci Code? No, maybe that's the other guy. No, Dan Jones, the guy who wrote the Plantagenets and Powers and Thrones. Plantagenets is a fantastic history of the Plantagenet family, which of course are my ancestors, the Plantagenets. So the Anglo-Norman kings. This is Henry V, Agincourt. This is about his brief 9-year reign. This is a new biography from Dan Jones that came out. And this interesting book called The Atlas Obscura about wildlife. It's a follow-up to a previous book, and it's very fascinating, published New York Times bestseller. This is a follow-up to it, just came out. So, yeah. So I spent a bit of money today buying books, and then I had to fill up the petrol in my car because I was on vapors after running back and forth trying to get my computer fixed last week. I was out of petrol. So petrol prices are down at the moment here in the U.S., and I profited from that lower price. But the price of petrol is still $1 a gallon more expensive than when Donald Trump left office after we began to fleeced at the price for the past 3.5 years. I want Atlas Obscura. No, it's pretty cool, Nicholas. It's pretty cool. And this is the follow-up edition to it that just came out. Bibliophile. I am that, Nick. I love books. So, yeah, cool beans. All right, folks, 30 likes, 17 people left, and we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks to everybody who tuned in, and thank you for the super chats. That was awesome, and 7 new members. This is fantastic. For a video that only has 219 members, those are pretty good stats. Not members, but 219 viewers because of YouTube's oppression. Thanks a lot, everybody. God bless. Have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow on the program. Tomorrow, it'll be an early start because it's Wednesday, and then I do Wednesdays with the Colonel on Ronaldo's program tomorrow. Whew, that's a lot of work for someone that doesn't get paid. Do I have the closing video in here? Or I can't remember if I had to rebuild this. No, it's not there. So what I'll do is just put up this. Cheers, everybody. Good night, and thanks a lot. Take care of yourselves.